with comparative criticism, which assesses a work through comparison with similar works across multiple languages. So it is not about literary works of considerable worth in a single language, but in several languages which share the same kind of culture or which could share the same kind of literary traits. Now, Matthew Arnold, the noted Victorian critic, was an exponent of this approach of literary criticism where he would compare, draw parallels, and he propagated a practice which was called the touchstone method. But this kind of an approach has sets very high expectations of the critic. The critic has to be a very refined scholar whose knowledge of ancient, medieval, and contemporary literatures across languages needs to be very thorough. And that's a prerequisite to be able to apply this kind of a literary critical approach. So, in a way, it's very demanding on the critic. And what it expects is, or what even the touchstone method expects the critic to do is to apply phrases or sections from great works which have been established, which hold a very superior position in the hierarchy of the literary tradition. Those sections of great works, phrases from those great works, need to be applied to contemporary works to decide their worth. So, this is called the touchstone method. Moving on to descriptive criticism, which is quite popular amongst English critics. Now, this kind of criticism involves an analysis of literary works for their aims, their methods, and their impact or the way they affect the reader. Critics, in fact, this variety of critics are mostly poets who justify their own work, who explain why they have written a particular text and the kind of effect they want the text to have on their readership. So, the most common examples of this kind of critic. Of people who follow or who practice this critical approach would be John Dryden and William Wordsworth. In fact, Dryden's prefaces, which preceded his works, contained explanatory notes to justify why he wrote what he wrote, and so did Wordsworth. So, in a way, the descriptive critic is trying to tell us, well, this is how I write, and this is why I write. So, in this kind of criticism, it traces the reasons for the origin and the creation of the work and then analyzes it bit by bit. Next, we come to impressionistic criticism, which records personal responses. So, if I am a critic and I have some personal response, I may not be adhering to any established rules or a set parameter or a framework. I'm just giving my personal response. So, there is no theoretical framework. I'm just responding at an individual level, in an individual capacity to a literary work. So, this kind of an approach emphasizes on the pleasure factor rather than evaluating the good and the bad aspects of the work. Now, an example of this kind of an approach would be the romantic critical approach and also Walter Pater's art for art's sake, where art they believed did not have to do anything with morality. Art should be just looked upon as an aesthetic entity. But this kind of an approach is no longer in vogue as it can be highly personal, that is subjective, and therefore unbalanced, biased, and erratic.